Day 3 of creation is just a uh, wonderful picture of this new world that God is in the process of creating. Day 3 is where we see the, the vegetation, the plants, the trees come into come into being. I I love plants and trees and flowers. I just think, number one, I think they're beautiful, but I think they're also one of the greatest resources that God has given us. What we see here is God providing the basic needs of His creation, the animal kingdom and those that were made in God's image, the human beings. Plants give us those basic needs, right? I mean, we get wood, we get food, we get all kinds of materials from trees and plants and herbs and medicines, and it's amazing. So let's read day 3, shall we? In Genesis chapter 1 verse 9 it says, "Then God said, 'Let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear.' And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters He called seas. And God saw that it was good." Let's stop there. So what we see here is, you might remember in the previous devotion, we talked about how that God separated the waters above the expanse from the waters below the expanse. So there would have been a canopy somewhere surrounding the earth, maybe in outer space, maybe somewhere in the atmosphere, and then there would have been subterranean waters in which there would have been reservoirs underground, or maybe just saturating the soil, the rocks on the surface of the earth. But now what we see is God separates the dry land from the seas. And so he must what must have happened is some of the sections of the earth must have risen and others dropped, so that the water would flow down into these basins. And so that's what we see in that first section here. So let's read on in verse 11 now. "Then God said, 'Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit after their kind, with seed in them.' And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kind, and trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a third day." Again, I just think this is such a beautiful picture. All of a sudden on day 3, we just see these beautiful plants and trees coming out of nowhere, really. God creating them out of nothing. And I want to point out that God talks about plants yielding seed, fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit after their kind with seed in them. And then again in verse 12, plants yielding seed and trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind. I mean, he just kind of repeats that. And what God builds in here is the reproductive system of these living plants, these living trees. He creates their own ability to reproduce. Brilliant, amazing, majestic. I mean, God just creates it out of thin air, or out of thin nothingness, and gives these trees, these plants, the ability to reproduce themselves. I just think this is such a picture of God's beauty, His amazing wisdom. I just love this portion of the creation account. So I hope that you're blessed by that, and that you can meditate on that. And when you go for a walk today, or maybe when you're out driving in your car, just look at the plants around you and just think about who God is, and what He's done for us, what He's provided for us through the plants and the trees and the flowers. I love you all. I'll talk to you soon.